This episode of Love Larn is sponsored by Scott Bonnar Fabrication and Parts. Welcome to Assembly Central here. Got the twin rail on the left, the 17-inch, and the 14-inch solid on the right. Pretty much, but not quite everything, sitting here all laid out ready to go so I can get a sense of what actually needs doing, what needs to go together. I also have the new brigs for the 14-inch sitting down here as well. There's the frame for the 17. Few other frame pieces at the back, catchers, etc, etc. What I've been trying to do is just get some of these little sub-assemblies put together, namely the clutches, bearings, all that sort of jazz. Still missing a bearing for this one, so that's why it's in bits. Otherwise, just going through all the bits and pieces that I've got, making sure I've got all the nuts and bolts in particular that I need. For example, the 4 nuts and bolts for the Soleplate, all the bits and pieces for the reel height adjusters, the bearing cups, etc, etc. Same over there, all the bits for the rear roller, bearing cups again, plus the axle clamps, the height adjusters, blah 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 blah. It just goes on and on and on. Fortunately for the 14-inch, I've got the stainless steel bolt kit, which is all new. From Cam Petrie, so that's sort of making life a little bit easier. Still missing, you know, the odd thing here and there. 17-inch is a bit of a different story. Basically got, you know, 2 sets of bolts from the 17-inch and the 14-inch that I'm sort of picking from to choose the best for this machine. But somehow I'm still missing a few bits and pieces. So I've tried to get everything sort of sorted out here, but yeah, still missing some items that I need. A little bit of painting left to do on that height adjuster. A few other odds and ends, a few touch-ups to do, of course. Front rollers, just had a tray body liner stuck on there. Bit of a quick hack, that one. Curious to see how it's going to go. And the bubble wrap down there, there's the high cut front roller for the 14-inch as well. Yeah, it's going to come together pretty quickly now, especially now that everything's been stripped and repainted and sort of ready to go. Just got to screw it all back together and make sure, you know, everything's adjusted correctly in terms of the chain tension and the, you know, the cutter relationship to the sole plate and, you know, the rear roller height and that sort of stuff. So not too many variables to play with there, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get everything up and running. So does my wife know that I'm doing this in the dining room? Yes, she does. Does she approve? No, of course not. Would yours or would your husband? No. But run out of space in the garage at the moment, so I sort of had to spill out into the dining room for a short period, hopefully, to get these things back up and running. If you haven't come across it previously, this is a handy little resource. It's available in the files or documents section of the Scott Bonnar Restorations Facebook group, and also on Google from one of the Mower websites. Can't remember which one, but I'll post a link directly to it anyway. If you search for Scott Bonnar 45 exploded parts diagram or something, I'm sure it will come up. Basically, this is the Rover diagram for a twin rail. I believe the 17. It will get you through pretty much the vast majority of any of the Scott Bonnar or Rover machines in any configuration. You know, there are slight differences that you'll become aware of as you go, but you know, nothing that is insurmountable in terms of tear down or reassembly. So they're not perfect, these diagrams, but they're really helpful. You know, starting at the beginning here, we've got the frame itself with the chain case cover, the deflector, the catcher, which is pretty simple. But if you look more closely, there's the assembly for the clutch fork, the motor mounting, the deflector screws. Next page, and just before we jump across, there's also the details as well, so specifically the part numbers, which can be handy if you're looking for something online. And it describes things like the thread for some of these nuts and bolts as well. and washer sizes and things like that, which can be kind of handy with these machines, given that they're not metric. For those of us in Oz, this page has got the rear roller, which was a vast mystery to me until I actually took one apart. But this gave me a pretty good indication of what I was going to be up against in terms of the the ratchet box and the pawls, the shaft and the bearing cups and all that sort of thing. The front reel, again, they're simple machines, but there's a few little parts that we need to be aware of as we're working through these things, especially if we want to get them back the way they were, in terms of having the washers where they need to go and all that sort of stuff. Common sense for some people, others like me, not so much. It's the bottom blade down there, the Soleplate, the front roller, the height adjuster, which is one of the more, oddly enough, one of the more complex parts of the machine. Over here we've got the intermediate clutch, the outer sprockets, the double sprocket, the chain tensioner, the corks inside, and the spring, and the bearings, and all that sort of stuff for the cutter clutch, which just causes a lot of questions. If you have this in front of you, it saves a lot of thinking, basically. And then your handlebars and cover plate, grips, throttle, and clutch cables and all that on the back. So as I said, I'll post a link to that in the video description, so you can download it if you want to. Handy dandy to have it printed off and keep it in the shed next to the parts while you're taking it down or putting it back up. I've got the three main components of the 14-inch solid deck machine laid out. What I'm going to start doing today is bolting them back together, just to give us a bit of a platform for the rest of the build to proceed. I held off doing this for a while, I don't know why, but the time has come. I've got all the paintwork's done. I've got my stainless steel bolts ready to go. I've made sure that I've sort of driven them in to their respective holes, just to make sure all the threads are readily accessible, nicely cut, ready to go for the actual assembly. And I'll grab the Soleplate as well with the blade on it and pop that in between those two panels and start building up to the top deck. Both of these panels are facing up, so they'll fold in like so. There's the catcher hanger and the little posts for the cutter height adjuster. So in a similar manner, this one will fold up. There's the hole for the height adjuster knob, etc, etc. Alright, so I just grabbed the Soleplate for this machine with its bottom blade in place from the garage. I've got my Soleplate mounting bolts as well, and I've got a 1/2-inch socket and a 1/2-inch ring spanner as well. These Soleplate mounting bolts have a Nyloc nut on the end, so whether they need anything else in there is debatable. I did have to cut one of them off the old machines, I think 17-inch, when I was disassembling it, so might think about popping a little bit of grease around the heads just to prevent any binding to the metalwork, despite the paint being there, obviously. But the other thing to consider is whether you want to use any thread locker on here. I guess these machines may need to be disassembled again in the future for any reason, especially your bottom blade. If you want to get that sharpened professionally, the cheapest way to do it is to take the Soleplate out and take it along with your reel, not have the whole machine done. Also not sure how the thread lock interacts with the nylon in there. I think a little dab of the blue stuff, which is what I've got, which is sort of reversible with a little bit of effort, maybe a heat, is probably the way to go. But again, these are the Nyloc nuts, so they should stay put. In comparison to the nuts on these side panels, they just thread right into the body of the deck here, so I might come back later and put a little bit of thread lock on there once I'm happy that the machine's gone together without any dramas in terms of needing to take it apart again. As I said, I'm going to start working upwards from the Soleplate, just to give me some rigidity to the assembly. The one thing I do want to check with this schematic is the orientation of the the bolt and the nut. I want to make sure that in this case, I'm heading through from the side panel and bolting up on the inside of the sole plate. So the holes on this machine, on the side panels, are a little bit on the tight side because the powder coatings kind of fill them up just a little bit, so I might need to get a tool on there just to help them along a bit. This is when it comes in handy, having a couple of socket sets, etc. We'll use the socket on the back side of this panel and the open-ended spanner on the inside, just to hold it in place. I'm not going to tighten that up all the way yet, I just want to get it loosely into place so that I'll have enough wiggle room at the bottom one. Just try and line that up. Just takes a little bit of extra persuasion to basically cut through the powder coat there. That thread's effectively cut now, so just get that finger tight. Again, get the open-ended spanner on there, socket on the back. I'm pretty certain that Cameron supplies these as the original UNC or UNF, the Imperial or American bolts rather than metric. So I'm just trying to be certain to use the 1/2 inch stuff for tightening these up since I've got them, just to avoid rounding over the heads as much as possible. So with the sole plate in place, what I've done is just labeled the front edge of this deck, because what I don't want to do is install it the wrong way around. The deflector clamps need to go through those holes, and these little doodads sort of stabilize it, I guess. So that's the front of the deck, and the nameplate holes, if you have one, they go at the back. So that's going to sit up against the edge of the machine like so. There's the 2 threaded holes on either side of the machine, and the 2 deck bolts for either side have a little lock washer as well, a little spring washer, sorry, which I'm going to put on the outside of the frame here. In the schematic diagram that I've got shows a twin rail machine, a Rover specifically, and not the solid deck. So sort of flying blind just a little bit with this part of the assembly, but for the same token, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just mainly trying to get those bolts in straight to the deck so that we're not cross-threading anything. Now this one doesn't feel quite right to me, so I'm just going to check it, make sure there's no nothing holding that up from going in the way it should be. Just loosen this one off. This one's just loosen it off a touch anyway, just to give us a bit of room. Not that there is any. Just try a different bolt. Just curiosity. I might just snug this one down for now, and we'll come back to that one once the frame's a little bit more squared up. So I'm going to flip the whole assembly over now, and I'm going to pop this side plate on so that it's facing the front as well, with the height adjuster facing forwards. Now, this question is just finding the right holes, because it always looks a little bit funny at first until everything kind of lines up and falls into place. There we go. So I'll start with the deck in this case. Just going to sort of get this assembly loosely stabilized as much as we can. That one goes in there. Just snug that up. Again, the Soleplate uses these longer bolts, so we'll just get them going through, and then flip the machine over to tighten up from the other side. There we go. Nice one. There we go. Get the little nylon nuts on the back end of this, so around the bottom end. These inside ones, I think, are the tightest of the lot. They're sort of like an inside curve almost to that, to this Soleplate, and it makes it a little bit tricky to get tools in there. So the little open spanner is definitely the way to go. Yeah, it's one of the things that I found when I was tearing the machines down. There's just not a lot of room to maneuver, you know, amongst that Soleplate when things are tight and gummy and dirty and rusted and everything else. And we'll see what's going on over here, lining up for our nicely sharpened blade. So I think what I'm going to do, just loosen this one off quite a bit more. You can see this is not going in straight at all here. So we'll just start again, I think, on that one. The holes are lining up there. That feels better. Sometimes just getting an eye in there is all it takes. And that one I can feel is, I'm just finger tightening there, that feels better as well. Right. And just want those two home as well. That's much better now. So there we have it, the frame's back together. It's looking a bit more like a mower again, which is kind of exciting. We'll peel the dummy tape off there and not tell anyone about that, because we don't want to embarrass ourselves too much. Reinforcing on these twin rail frames is often important. The motor sitting on the top of the two rails, the older motors in particular can vibrate quite a bit. Also, if you've got a clutch alignment issue, if there's any wobble going on there, that vibration can be transmitted down to the frame, and eventually what will happen is the frame will develop little hairline cracks, and along these two rails through the roundabout where the mounting bolt holes are for the engine. If they're left untreated long enough, the frame will eventually fail. So the common approach to dealing with that is to reinforce the rails with some angle on the underside to basically add some meat to the two rails. One of the more important things is to make sure that you're leaving clearance for the two holes through which the grass deflector is mounted, so the little clamp screws basically. So you can see on this frame there's this hole on this end, this hole on this end. The reinforcing sections are here, 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 and then down again on this side. Single piece of angle that's been notched out around the motor mounting holes. What I realized when I got this back was that this hole hadn't been accounted for in terms of the grass deflector, so I've just had to drill that out myself, which wasn't the end of the world. But the other consideration, if you can see it, is that there is a bit of thickness added to the rail now, where the clamp screw, the L-shaped clamp screw that sits there, is going to sit a little bit further back than it would have without that bit of angle in there. So it's you know, ideally there would have been a little notch cut out there as well for that clamp screw to rest straight up against the original rail. I think in my case I'll probably get away with it. It might be a little bit off, but might have to, you know, drill this hole back a little bit further to account for that. The other consideration as well is that with these little clamp deflector screws, you're not going to have as much thread as you would have originally. Just some considerations if you're reinforcing. I think the consensus is that if you've got the frame stripped down, a lot of them will have cracks that need to be welded or mended in some shape or form. If you don't have cracks, reinforce it anyway while you're stripped down.